Chapter 11 Auxiliary Recruit. Conan stood stiffly to attention in front of the table in Galenus' room while an elegant young Syrian in a dark red cloak looked at him from different angles. Outside, the spring rain poured down on the courtyard, splashing from the eaves of the colonnade. Conan had taken 3 days to think about what Fulvius had said, and now he could see that there had never really been a chance of his deciding any other way. It only remained for Sosthenes, the young Herodian commander of Sosthenes' foot soldiers, to see it the same way. "Well, he looks fit enough, Tribune. He can read and write, and he hasn't gotten a criminal record. I can't be choosy these days. A pity he can't afford a horse. The third company's under strength, and I don't know where I'm going to get mounts from. Not from the Arabians at their prices." "I'm afraid there's no question of a horse," said Galenius. "Conan will have to foot slog like a lot of good men before him. When does the draft start north of Caesarea?" "The day after tomorrow, if I can round them all up by then. The season's recruits are a rough lot, and I shall be hard-pressed to get them even partly trained by the time Vespasian's ready, if he ever is." He turned back to Conan. "So there it is. Report to the barracks tomorrow evening. You'll march north at dawn 2 days from now, and as I don't intend to have 20 crying sets of relations to deal with then, I want you in the night before. Get the farewells over tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Conan didn't know how to salute, so he bowed instead, and tried to get out of the room tidily, feeling 2 pairs of amused eyes on his back. He found a place on the far side of the courtyard where he could watch the door of the Tribune's office. He felt as cold and heavy inside as if his stomach were full of gray porridge, and he could still feel how Sosthenes had touched him, feeling his muscles as if he had been a slave in the market. But he might have been just that so easily. At least he had chosen this. Voices sounded louder across the courtyard. Sosthenes was leaving. The 2 men came out from under the arch. "Is it still raining?" "No, not so much. Jupiter be praised. Another day like today and the roads north would have been washed away for good. Orderly, my horse." When Galenus came back from seeing his visitor off, he found Conan loitering uncomfortably outside his door. "Not having second thoughts?" he asked, suddenly seeing the boy as he was now, and as he would be when the army had put its mark upon him. "No, sir. It's just that I wanted to thank you. I know some companies are better than others, and it makes a difference. Sosthenes might not have taken me without your word." "Possibly not. Now it's up to you." He turned to go into his room, but then paused again. "You probably had all the advice you can manage from Fulvius, most of it good. One last word from me. It's quicker to learn something the first time. Don't argue, and do as you're told. You can work out if you were told right later, when you've had more experience." Suddenly, Conan wished he was leaving at once. The long hours of the next day were going to be almost more than he could bear to live through, and now Lucia must be told. The Tribune was right. It was easier to do things quickly. Lucia knew, of course. Conan had never needed before to try to conceal his plans, and he had not been particularly good at it. Philo helped his brother pack his things almost in silence. Lucia made a pitiful attempt at a special farewell meal, and then the last hours were mercifully over. There had been no more rain, and the second dawn was cold and clear. For the first time in his life, Conan was woken by trumpets. He picked himself up, his eyes still half closed with sleep, and began to roll up the blanket he had been sleeping in. The floor had been hard and damp, and there had been bugs. As the decurion, in charge of the detail of recruits, roared at them from the doorway, he could not imagine how he was going to march 20 miles that day. The squad was lined up in the barrack square outside, a strange assortment shivering in the half-light. Conan bent to retie his sandal thong, but jerked upright as he was roared at again. To his surprise, Sosthenes himself came to see them go. The decurion saluted so smartly Conan thought his backbone would snap. "All correct, Terentius? No defaulters?" "Only one, sir, and I was never sure of him." "Right, 35 recruits to deliver. 6 days to Caesarea, do you think?" "It depends on the road, sir, and they're a raw lot." "Very well, decurion. We shan't expect any records. March off." There were few people about so early in the market as the raw lot marched through, and no one Conan knew. He was relieved at that. It would be talked about that he wouldn't be there to hear, but he wouldn't be there to hear. Better to forget about Philadelphia for the moment, to think only of the long days ahead and putting one foot in front of the other. Then at the northern gate, a familiar shape detached itself from the wall. Philo, in a dark cloak, his face looking suddenly thinner and older. Their eyes met, and Philo raised a hand in greeting. Conan tried to grin, but it did not feel as if he had succeeded. Then the arch was dark overhead, and the road ran on in the narrow bottom of the valley between the higher hills around the city. Char's farm was not far away. The sun was not yet up over the eastern hills, and the streets of Philadelphia were still gray as Philo turned from the northern gate and made his way home. His father was gone, Nicanor too, and now, with Conan marching northward and away from them forever, the pain of the last long months came to him as freshly as if it were still the first day in the marketplace. He was crying before he knew it, sniveling like a small boy. He turned against the wall of the house he was passing and buried his head in the crook of his arm. A passing laborer on his way down the market stopped beside him. "Are you all right, son?" Philo sniffed hard and wiped his nose on his cloak. "Yes, I fell and banged my elbow and it made my eyes run." The man seemed satisfied and went off down the hill. Philo wiped his eyes too and went on. Conan had gone, and that was that, and 25 years was not a lifetime, even if it seemed like that at the moment. What else could his brother have done anyway? A tall, well-grown boy. That was what armies were for, and he himself wasn't alone, not as Conan would be. There was Hylas. He tried for a moment to imagine how life would be if his father had never found Hylas. It was hardly possible, and he blessed the unknown God who filled his friend's life so completely and who had brought him to Philadelphia. It was not the practical things he could do that were such a comfort, but what he was and the ideas he had. What other fugitive from Rome would have thought of bringing Romans into the house? And yet, if he had not, Philo would not now be coming home to even the remnant of a family. The eastern edge of the roofs above him turned a fuzzy gold, and the street ahead was suddenly full of light. There was warmth in the sun, and it looked from the few clouds as if it was not going to rain today. Good for Conan on the road, though he must try not to think so much of Conan, and good for them all, particularly poor Lucia, trying to coax her fire to burn. He turned up the steep slope behind the house and went in at the back gate. Sure enough, Lucia was trying to get the fire to go, crimson in the face with a strand of her hair in her eyes. The woodpile looked low. Philo brought her over an armful before squatting down beside her on the cracked paving stones. "He's gone? You saw him?" "For a moment. He looked a lot older already." "Well, he would do." Lucia said no more about the boy who was the oldest of her nurslings, the child she had cared for since the day he was born. She got painfully to her feet and greeted Hylas as he came out into the sunshine. "Fulvius gave me some almost fresh rolls. Could you eat one? It's warm enough to sit out this morning." She had them ready on a plate, covered with a cloth. Philo sat down on the bench beside Hylas with the food between them, and they had breakfast together. "I sent Gorion away yesterday evening when you were with Conan," said Hylas. "It was no time for an Aramaic lesson, but he left some work for you to translate. He said he might come up later this morning. Paulinus is ill, so he's not as hard-pressed as usual." Somehow Philo supposed he must bring his mind back to his studies, knowing how soon he would have to prove himself to Marius Galenus. He had learned quickly, knowing that he must, but would the tribune be satisfied with him? He followed Hylas into their room. The copying table was already set up, but the room seemed larger now, for Lucia had already packed away Conan's things. He could hear her outside washing the bed cover. It seemed a very final thing to do. Philo curled his legs up on the bed that was now his alone and opened his tablets. 2 days later, Cousin Charles came, just as Nicanor had foretold, with a letter addressed to Philo. He sat on the bench, red-faced and furious at being sent on an errand to a schoolboy, while Lucia fussed over him, and Philo tried to explain that the letter was to him because Conan was no longer there. It was not true, but seemed the best way out. That set Charles off again. "Your own cousin! The boy takes a step like that without a word to anyone? Did he consult your uncle?" Philo was silent, for that had not occurred to any of them. The fact that he was not the only one to be left out seemed to pacify the farmer. "Well, here's your letter. You'd better read it, I suppose." Philo broke the seal, suddenly remembering the day he had told Hylas that he had never had a letter. This was one he had never wanted. To Philo, son of Apollodorus, greetings. I hope that the god I follow will grant that some day I may see you again, although I do not know when that may be. I am going to Machaerus, where brave men are still resisting Rome. My greetings to Lucia. If you can think well of me, farewell. But what's the boy talking about? Asked Charles. Machaerus? What business has he got there? All I know is that when I went to wake him this morning, his bed hadn't been slept in. Fine gratitude. It was an hour before they had calmed him, with death all the while in their hearts. Only after the puzzled man has left could they speak freely. Philo, you knew of this? There was a deep look of hurt in Lucia's eyes. He nodded his head. But I hoped he wouldn't do it, that it was only talk. Your brother was not one just to talk from what I saw of him, said Hylas, but I doubt if he has any idea of what he has done. You've never seen Machaerus. It's a bitter place, a palace inside a fortress on a spike of rock, with the town huddled beneath it. The gorge is so deep on 3 sides that there's only one road in. It squats there with its gate towards the desert, and a glimpse across the ravines of the salt sea, and Judea beyond. I wonder if any of my friends are still there. I hope not. They would see the smoke when Jerusalem burns. Hylas's voice was full of pain. Conon to the north and Nicanor to the south, all in 3 days, said Lucia. Thank the gods my little mistress never lived to see it. There seemed nothing more to be said. It was at the beginning of the next month that the tribune called Philo to his office. Decimus was standing by the table, looking at the scroll in his hands with an air of deep frustration. Can you make anything of that? Asked Galenus, taking it from the centurion and tossing it to the boy. Philo's mouth went dry and he nearly dropped it. This was going to be the moment, but when he unrolled it, he almost grinned with relief, only it would not do to admit how easy it was going to be. It's mostly names in a list of stores. You can translate it all? Asked the tribune. Yes, sir. Then sit down over here and get on with it. Philo went over to the clerk's table in the corner of the room. There were writing materials lying there. He weighted down the scroll and pulled the tablets towards him. Then something struck him. Greek or Latin, sir? Latin, of course, said the centurion crossly, looking at him with suspicion. That made it a little more difficult. He had to go through an extra stage because he could not yet think in Latin. He wrote the names down carefully, and then the instructions about the collection of stores that made up the second part of the message. Hylas had done wonders for his handwriting. The 2 officers were still talking. Galenus was watching the boy unobtrusively, but Philo did not notice him as he concentrated on the work before him. You finished? That was quick. Let me see, he said, as Philo sat back to check what he had written. The tribune picked up the tablets and studied them while the boy watched his face apprehensively. The Roman seemed pleased. Yes, that's clear enough, so long as it's accurate, and we can check that later. Look, Decimus, I told you. See here? Both men bent over the tablets in the doorway where the light was good. Iocannon of Gizhela, sure. Sir, said the centurion, pointing to a name at the top of the list with a stubby finger. Galenus turned back to Philo, who was waiting by his stool, wondering if it was Hylas's Iocannon. Good, he said, looking down at the boy. That seems just what I wanted. Now, I think we'll post the regular men to other duties for a while, and see if you can manage the rest of the work, and me. His spelling was vile anyway. Go and ask Fulvius for his store requisitions, and copy it out neatly, and then I shall have 2 letters for you to write. You know how to write letters properly? I think so, said Philo, trying to remember all Hylas had taught him. I hope so for your sake. I can't be bothered with the pompous bits at the beginning and end. I shall leave them to you, said the tribune, trying to look fierce, but Philo was used by now to his size and the dark face with the large features. Galenus was one of the strongest-looking men he had ever seen. 5 years before, he must have been a formidable athlete, and his wound and boredom and bad luck had already softened him a little. Hylas was waiting apprehensively for him on the bench in their courtyard when the tribune finally let him go. He was pleased. He must have been, or he wouldn't have kept you so long. It was good to be praised, to have Lucia smile and see the satisfaction in Hylas's eyes. Philo held out his hand. Look, ink, your mark. Within a couple of months, Philo could hardly remember when he had not worked in the corner of the square, whitewashed room, sunny now, in the late spring, copying lists, writing records, and listening with half an ear to what the tribune was doing, so that he could anticipate the occasional roars when something was wanted fast. He was not often overworked, and from time to time the tribune still sent him on errands. It was late one afternoon when he was coming back across the little square outside the temple. He had been delivering the answer to an invitation from Eupolemus. As he passed the temple steps, a young man leaning against the base of a statue spoke his name. He had a dark beard and wildly curling hair. His face was tanned and his clothes a mass of tatters, as if he came from the desert. His voice was husky, unfamiliar, but then the man said his name again, and after it, his pet name, a word no one outside his family knew. It was something that had happened before. Philo stopped, trembling. The man moved farther into an angle in the wall. Out of sight of passers-by, only the leprous beggar above on the steps was singing his usual tuneless song. Philo looked at the man, and then took his outstretched hands. Nicanor? How many dark-haired brothers have you? No, idiot, don't hug me. My captain would kill me if he knew I was here, but with luck he never will. Leave the gate unbarred tonight, if you can, otherwise I'll come over the wall. He broke away down a side alley, and was out of sight almost at once. Philo went straight home. There was no one in the courtyard, and he was able to get to Hylas's room without anyone seeing him, which was as well, because he knew that he could not control his face yet. Hylas took one look, put down his pen, and said, What is it? Not Conan? No, Nicanor, here in the city. He's coming tonight. Should I tell Lucia? How did he look? Like a Jewish outlaw? Then no, not till he's here. He may be picked up by a patrol and not come, and then it would be all for nothing. Philo thought that the last glow would never go from the sky. He waited in the shadows near the gate, seeing the lights in the other courtyard and Fulvia serving dinner. He did not hear footsteps outside in the road, but the door moved gently against its hinges. Philo slipped the bolt quickly, and Nicanor came in. It was dark by the gate. He froze still against it while a servant with a loaded dish passed through the lighted patch between the kitchen and the dining room and then crossed the main storeyard like a shadow. I haven't told Lucia. Let me go first, said Philo. He lifted the curtain and went into the old woman's room. She was looking well that night. Her legs were giving her less pain, and her eyes seemed brighter. What is it, Philo? She said. Then she saw his face, and her hands went to her heart. No, Lucia, good news. Look. He held back the curtain, and Nicanor came into the room. Hylas, who had been sitting beside Lucia's bed, stood up quickly, and moved back. Then Nicanor crossed the room in 2 paces, knelt down, and put his head into the old woman's lap. It was the first gentle thing that Philo had seen his brother do for so long that he felt tears prick behind his eyes. There had been food left over from the evening meal. He had made sure of that. He went out quickly to fetch it, and when he came back, Nicanor was sitting on the bed beside Lucia, holding her hand. He ate quickly, as if he had not seen food for a long time, and then looked up at their expectant faces. Suddenly he stopped being a strange wild rebel in dirty clothes who had come in from the night and was Nicanor again, embarrassed with people and seeming to resent their interest even while he needed it. I don't know what you want me to tell you. I said I'd come if I could, and I'm here. But I can't stay long. I mustn't spend the night here, and I must be out of the city by midnight. Where then, Nicanor? Asked Hylas. Machaerus, where else? It's where I have been these last months. What's it like? Asked Philo. How you expected? How did I know what to expect? There are no Romans, and that's enough. But I only just got there in time, and there's been a lot to learn, and Titus is back. It won't be long now. That's why we're out after supplies. We shall be under siege again before summer, but then we'll show them a thing or two they didn't learn in Galilee. Eleazar will show them. Who's Eleazar? My captain. It was someone different talking, full of hero worship for his new leader, not the Nicanor they had known. Philo suddenly thought of Conan. Nicanor had asked for him, but made no comment when he was told where he was. Perhaps he would come south now. His basic training must be almost over, and Philo knew from his own work that there were large troop movements underway. Hylas got up and said a quiet good night. Philo caught his brother's eye and went out too, leaving Nicanor with Lucia. It was an hour later when the curtain moved again and Philo was still waiting, wrapped in his cloak by the fig tree. He got up and hugged Nicanor for the first and last time. There was nothing to say, for they both knew what was happening. Philo closed the gate behind his brother and stood for a long time in the dark before he could face even the tactful silence of Hylas.